Okay, my term is the blush, specifically the anatomical response, as opposed to the cosmetic application or the associated shame in the abstract. I mean the reddening of a face that's just been doing something conceivably embarrassing, uh, seen doing it, I should say, like reveal one's love of cockatiels, for instance. It's not embarrassing to love cockatiels, for the record. I only say that because of a personal vendetta one particular cockatiel had against me when I was a child. I loved him, and he made me bleed. I named him Apex, because the little bastard wanted nothing to do with peace. Here's how I've been thinking about it. The site of reddening is a semi-translucent portal between interiority and exteriority, one's ostensibly secret private domain ripped open without permission through the act of witnessing. Our porosity becomes apparent when least want to acknowledge it. Two features make it theoretically rich. It's involuntary, the body confesses over the self-subjection, and it's relational, always happening in proximity to another. It requires, or at least imagines, a witness, so it sits exactly on the line between the private and the social, and dissolves that line in the act of appearing. And back to the cockatiels, they do blush, they just conceal it under facial feathers. Macaws are the poster children, but cockatiels hide theirs beneath plumage. This is a small running joke at Darwin's expense, since he'll insist in a moment that blushing is uniquely human. The term has a surprisingly clean lineage from physiology into queer theory. Darwin, 1872, devotes a chapter to it and calls blushing, quote, the most peculiar and most human of all expressions, end quote. His trigger is self-attention, thinking about others, thinking about you, and this key observation is the one I just made. It can't be performed or suppressed. Despite visiting Australia, where cockatiels are indigenous, in 1836, he evidently never saw one, and so they arrive here in my presentation in 2026 to lay the blush down on his candy ass. But we proceed along. Sartre, in Being and Nothingness, turns that physiology into phenomenology. His account of the look argues that shame arrives with the other's gaze. I am ashamed of myself as I appear to the other. Sylvan Tompkins in the 60s makes shame one of the innate affects and the most reflexive one. Sedgwick and Frank, 1995, carry Tompkins into queer theory, reframing shame as identity shaping. Probyn, Elsbeth, gives the term its book, Blush, Faces of Shame, 2005. Against pride politics that wants shame purged, she argues shame is productive. It enables engagement and it presupposes investment. You can't be shamed about something you don't care about. The blush is evidence of caring. And Ahmed is where I anchor it. In The Cultural Politics of Emotion, which we read earlier, she argues bodies surface through the impressions others leave on them. She asks us to hear the press in impression. We didn't read Cultural Politics of Emotion. Sorry, I read that on my own. We tackled a different Ahmed chapter. I'm wasting time here. Queer phenomenology reframes this as orientation, bodies directed toward and away, and the skin as the record of contact. Her example is gooseflesh, or goosebumps, cold air made legible on the surface. For feminist and queer inquiry, the blush does three things. It puts the involuntary and vulnerable relational body where the sovereign, rational subject usually sits. It treats exposure and porosity as conditions of selfhood rather than failures of composure, and it lets shame be generative, reclaiming an affect, respectability politics once disavowed. But I want to complicate it twice, because the term strains in interesting places. First, legibility is uneven. The blush reads on fair skin and is largely invisible on dark skin, so a term that promises universal human exposure privileges a particular surface, whose porosity is permitted to show. And this isn't a critique from outside. Ahmed's own Fanon chapter is already asking whose body extends comfortably into space. Second, political ambivalence. Probyn's productive shame sits in tension with Ahmed's wariness that collective shame, that is, the national apology, say, can recenter the one who blushes. The blush can perform virtue instead of enacting it. My research sits in game studies, and the blush poses a problem there, because everything I've said depends on involuntariness. So consider 3 tiers. Real-life makeup blush, authored in advance, worn statically, the appearance of the sign without the event. A rendered blush in a game. It happens in front of you in response to something. The event structure is back, but the trigger is scripted, or canned. And then the 3rd tier, which is the real one, the player. Picture someone deep in a romance scene with an NPC they've grown genuinely fond of, excited, maybe even aroused, and a spouse walks into the room, not speaking from personal experience at all. The blush that follows is entirely real. Probin's point that shame presupposes investment, proven on the player's face on behalf of a body on screen. But the tiers are collapsing. LLM-driven NPCs are entering games now, and when one of them blushes, selected from a possibility space so large that no one scripted this response this moment, the canned objection stops working. Because human blushing is canned too, in a sense, a fixed display on a trigger. What we actually use to certify genuineness is the size of the possibility space that's collapsed in the moment. And that leaves my real question. The blush has always been our involuntary proof of an inside. What is the proof of what is it proof of when the surfacing no longer requires one, or when we can't tell? Which is the becoming I'll end on. The blush sign itself in process, migrating across surfaces that may or may not conceal an interior. The blush unresolved. I actually timed this and went 20 seconds short earlier, but since I figure I'm posting this and not having to use class time, I left in a few flubs that I'm not going to edit out and read a little bit more slowly, I guess. So I'm at like 7 minutes now. Thanks for your time.